Well, hello again, everybody. We thank you for joining our webinar today. Normally, we're doing coffee chat webinars. This is an afternoon webinar. Maybe a time for a latte versus a strong cup of French roast. But we're really happy to have you with us, Kip Gregory. Welcome, Kip.
Hi, Peter. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and Kip, I could go on and on about your bio, but I know the folks really want to talk about the subject matter. But you have authored a book called Winning Clients in a Wired World. Your firm is here in D.C., where the pollen is just filling the air, and I apologize, folks, if I'm a little sniffly here. For folks that want to look at Kip's website, it's at gregory-group.com, gregory-group.com. And Kip has consulted for years with leading financial services firms in the U.S. and Canada, particularly as it relates to using technology to help the distributed sales professionals do a better job, be more productive. And along the way, Kip, you picked up quite a bit of knowledge of one of my favorite social media tools, which is LinkedIn. And by way of introduction, I read a really good article, for those that haven't seen it yet, in the Wall Street Journal last week, I think, called "Ignoring LinkedIn is Hurting Your Career" by Joanna Stern. And she talks about how 61% of users visit no more than every few weeks to link to the LinkedIn homepage, their homepage, I should say. And you've said, Kip, that 60% of U.S. workers are on LinkedIn, which is 124 million people, but only 30% of the total 400 million people around the world who are on this. And so what's so interesting to me, and I'm guilty as anybody maybe watching this, is that here we are on this site, perhaps abusing, misusing, or refusing to get really involved in the power of LinkedIn. It's not just the fact that so many recruiters are on it, that people are when you Google a person, one of the first things that pop up is their LinkedIn profile. But you've uncovered a whole nother side of LinkedIn, which is largely ignored as well, and that is mining the data that's in there for marketing and sales. So
Yeah.
again, welcome, and there's so much to cover, but am I correct that people are largely ignoring their LinkedIn profiles and the power behind this data?
I think you are, Peter, and I think it's important. It's an important starting point because you mentioned a couple of things that a lot of folks who aren't familiar with the site immediately kind of default to, which is first that it's a career management tool, and really when you net it down, it's a job search tool. And yes, it can be that. It can also be a marketing tool, which is what all of the quote-unquote gurus are out there talking about. Build a presence, create a following, position yourself as a thought leader, ultimately be the beneficiary of a bunch of inbound interest in what you do, all of which is great. But what I find is that, well, first, it's over the horizon for most people, and in particular for most advisors and agents, most producers across the business. And I know today we have people from virtually every facet of insurance and financial services on the call with us. The average person comes in and looks at this site, and they immediately get overwhelmed by what it has to offer. And so they freeze. And what happens in that process is they forego a ton of benefit, where if they knew what to do, and we'll talk a little bit about this today, they could find a place for LinkedIn and what it offers in their current relationship management and business development process that I think would be eye-opening to them.
Okay, yeah, right. And I also want to get into a little bit about how the corporate brand differs from the personal brand on LinkedIn. But let's start with an initial. This may be a shock to some people. It certainly was to me when I first started chatting with you about this, Kip. And that is, this is a perfect example of quality being more important than quantity. And I'm as guilty as anybody inviting people that seem kind of interested, that I'm kind of interested in, or conversely, accepting invites from people. And I think we've amassed, I use the term we loosely, we've amassed a lot of connections, right? But is that a good thing? What's better in your view?
Well, it really depends on what your strategy is, because if you're in an industry or you're selling a product or service that is transactional and that's based on high volumes of throughput, that can be exactly the right approach. Essentially treating LinkedIn as an advertising platform, which is what so many people are encouraging today. The miss, I think, is, and in particular in industries like this one, which are so word of mouth and referral driven, that people, they focus on the big picture and overlook the immediate opportunity. And the immediate opportunity, you think about it, and I know this varies from segment to segment in the business, but most of the advisors that I encounter, or producers that I encounter, if they're dealing with a higher end book of clientele, they might be looking for 10 or 12 or maybe a couple dozen or maybe even a handful of really good client relationships to add to the mix over the course of the year. And if they got there, that would make for a great year for them. And so I always encourage people to step back and think for a minute about what is your objective? Because if it really is to retain the people that you work with now and add very selectively to that group, then it really does become quickly a quality over quantity, starting with the relationships that you maintain. And what we found is that people, unintentionally, and that's part of it's part of the rationale, and it's also part of the problem, we've all put out these virtual fish bowls and invited people to drop a business card into them. And that really has no value to you unless what you're looking to do is push an advertising message out. In fact, it can be distracting to you. So, to kind of operationalize what we're talking about, one of the things that we encourage people to do is, before you do anything with your network, the first thing you should do is create a list of the relationships in real life that are most important to you. We generally call it your Focus 50, your Focus 100, or 150, some limited number, and do homework initially on them to see, number one, who of them are you connected to? Secondly, who's on LinkedIn or the other social platforms that you're not yet connected to? And then what's a smart strategy for reaching out and establishing those connections in a way that you can manage it so that you can further a dialogue with people and not just engage in this business card swap that's kind of the mindless, I'd like to invite you to my LinkedIn network, somebody hits accept, and you keep going.
Yeah, right. So how do you whittle, or let's say you have your 150 or 200 or 100 or whatever it is, of those influencers, those centers of influence, the people you care most about in your network, whether it's offline or online. So now going back into LinkedIn, how do you call those folks out? How do you get to where you want?
Well, that's a really good question, and this is one of the places where people quickly get confused and end up stalled because they can't figure out what the right set of steps is. First thing is, LinkedIn will constantly, especially when you're new or less active on the site, they'll constantly invite you to upload your address book, whether it's Outlook or Gmail or any of the others. And we encourage people not to do that, and we don't have to encourage most producers or advisors because they are reluctant to part with that information, since most of those people, or lots of them, are clients. So we've actually put together a quick spreadsheet that makes it easy for somebody, and this is something we can include in a download after the call today, where if people want it, they can just let us know in the chat window, where you list first name, last name, company, because that's the minimum information needed, and then the spreadsheet will create a search URL for you right into LinkedIn. So you click on that search string, and it will bring you to a results page to tell you if the person you're looking for is there. And that way you bypass having to give LinkedIn any information. You don't have to invite them right away, but you've already established, yeah, they're there. And so now I can make note of it and reach out to them in whatever timing makes sense.
Okay. Well, I know you want to get more into the particulars of creating lists and such, but one thing I've seen over and over in articles, including this one again in the Wall Street Journal last week. It's about your profile and keeping your profile updated. Can you speak a little bit to that? Because I just like going to a cocktail party, when somebody comes up to you with their card and you just want to run.
Yeah.
You see people on LinkedIn making those same mistakes with all kinds of things, with what they say, with typos, with the bad photos. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah.
We should be paying attention to our profile and make sure that it's completely filled out and everything, right?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And you know, LinkedIn will help you with that when you're getting started, because they will tell you right on that profile edit page where you stand. And I forget what all of the grades are, but ultimately it ends in I think All-Star is what they when you've got a complete profile. And by their assessment, complete means that you've gone and checked the box on 7 or 8 things. You've filled out obviously your name and your current position. You've completed a summary. You've listed some skills. You've connected with at least 50 people. You have a profile photo. And just as you said, a quick kind of aside on that, take the time and spend a little bit of money and get a good professional headshot. You'd be amazed even now at what you see, and even in your own network, folks listening, watching today may know of these situations where, you know, you go in and they're in sunglasses, or they're on the beach in casual clothes, and you know, it's not the end of the world, but that's not really the professional image that most people, unless you know you arrange vacations or you're a person.
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah, you're selling bar equipment on beach bars or something.
Yeah, exactly. So you know, take the time, get that headshot, and yeah, I just came from speaking at a conference a couple of days ago, and the sponsor, the broker dealer who ran it, had a setup with a professional photographer there for the advisors that work with them who don't have one or want you know, a fresh one.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Well, you said take a few minutes, and that's it doesn't even take a few minutes to, when you're inviting someone to LinkedIn, to just write something that would be relevant to them. You can't just use the default. Hey, let's link in. You know, boom. Yeah. You know, people know it's the things you like in Facebook. You know.
Yeah, and you know, picking up where I was a minute ago, talking about once you find somebody and you're not yet connected to them. The end of that story is 2 more pieces. One is exactly what you're saying, which is to personalize an invitation. And that doesn't mean you have to make each one unique. It just means that the one that you send out has to be different from the default ones that LinkedIn sends out.
Okay.
Because, you know, and think about it, and I invite everybody who's with us today to think about this too. If you've gotten 3 or more invitations over the last week or 2, I would bet $10 that every single one of them is that default, Kip, I'd like to add you to my professional network on LinkedIn, Peter van Aartrijk. I mean, it's not even personalized to just a first name. And so, you know, instead, if you say, it could be something as simple and casual as, just saw you on LinkedIn, would love to connect. Let me know if I can put you together with anybody in my network. Let me know, I'd love to know how you're using it. Just something short and sweet, because you've only got 300 characters in total anyway. But personalize, and then the other really important thing is to send them out in small batches, because if you blast them out to everybody you know, even if you focus on those 50 people and all 50 of them are on LinkedIn and all of them you haven't yet connected with, chances are pretty good these are people you know. They're going to come back to you with an acceptance. And if you're smart, you manage this well, you can engage in dialogue with them, where if you know you're getting 20, 30, 40 of these things hitting your inbox over a day or 2, you're just going to want to push them out and be able to pay attention to, you know, the urgent stuff that's coming in, and in that you miss this opportunity to engage further. So, batch them 3 to 5 at a time is the advice that we give, so that you can manage that flow, because that means you're going to get 1 or 2 every couple of days. And
okay. Okay. Question about the address book you mentioned earlier, Kip. If you loaded the address book, can you get it back?
You can go in and remove contacts. LinkedIn, they have a pretty solid privacy policy. I don't have the concern about them and what they will do with the information that I do with, say, Facebook, who over the years has been in and out of the news because they arbitrarily change it. And, they haven't done it for a while, and maybe they've learned their lesson. LinkedIn has, I think, understood the importance of maintaining that. So I don't know if it goes away entirely on their side, but I don't think if you've already done that, it's something worth anguishing about, because they'd be shooting themselves in the foot if they did something with that information.
One thing I've noticed with LinkedIn more recently, maybe it's the election, I don't know, but there's a lot of stuff. People are posting a lot of stuff. It doesn't seem to be very much related to an industry or a career. And there is a lot of good information too, but what are some rules of the road? You've said that leaders are listeners more than they are talkers.
Yeah.
And so what is that balance of posting versus listening and sharing in your view?
Well, it's a really good question, and I know we've had this conversation offline. This idea of talking and listening is really at the heart of a lot of the opportunity and the concern. Because what I would invite anybody with us today to think about is, when you go into your own LinkedIn feed, how much time do you spend in it? And how interested are you in all of that stuff, as you call it? I have a more,
fire hose.
colorful.
Garden hose, not a fire hose.
Yeah, it's, all of us are looking for the off switch. Let's be honest. There are very few people that we aggressively want to follow because we hang on their every word. And for most people, what you just want to do is filter out the noise. And so, my first encouragement to people is put yourself in the recipient's shoes and ask yourself, so what? And I know that flies in the face of a lot of what's out there, that it's really all about presence and visibility and just staying in front of people so that you're top of mind. I think it comes back to this quality-quantity debate. And I'd rather be known as somebody who people looked for more from than wish would just shut up, which is, often where, and on Facebook, you can't do this on LinkedIn without completely turning off somebody, but on Facebook you can put them into a different, not a friend category, but an acquaintance category to get all the blabbermouths off your news feed. So, back to your question, I think shooting for routine, regular communication, maybe it's for people who are starting from nothing, it might be once a month to start, moving up to every couple of weeks to once a week. And, there are statistics about people who push stuff out more frequently. I think for most of our listeners today, they're not marketers, well, some of them are, but more of them are salespeople, and they're interested in getting in front of people who need what they offer, not necessarily hunting down a lot of content and curating that content.
Okay, a couple of really good questions that are relevant to what you're talking about so far. What are your thoughts on Sales Navigator and other LinkedIn add-on marketing tools, Kip?
Yeah, that's a real good one. Sales Navigator, for people who aren't aware, is this new platform essentially that LinkedIn introduced, and what they've done is it really, I think, is the strongest recognition of this whole social selling and prospecting side of the ledger that we've been talking about, that I've seen from them. And it's been out now probably about a year and a half, maybe a little bit more. And its focus is on what we're talking about. How do you mine the intelligence to create more qualified leads that you can keep in touch with, or you can track, frankly. You can monitor their activity, and then you can reach out to. It's considered different from the LinkedIn.com platform by the people at LinkedIn, and it has a different price point. So when you opt for Sales Navigator, you leave behind the traditional LinkedIn platform. And where that really matters to me is in that advanced search capability. It has its own advanced search, but it's different from what I just walked through on the screen a few minutes ago. And frankly, there are parts of it that are really good, but there are some missing parts that I really wish were included. Is it worth it? That's a personal decision, and I wouldn't begin to answer that for the crowd as a group without understanding what they were looking to accomplish first.
Okay. If you can screen connections by various factors, is this question, then what's the downside of having just a humongous database? Like, why should we cull people out if we can do it anyway with filters later?
Well, because it depends on where you want to go with that information. And if again, your interest is in being able to push content to them, then that's a very viable strategy. The reason I focus on the things, we're focusing on the things I've been talking about, is most financial services practices aren't built on that basis. They are word-of-mouth driven. They're referral generated leads, and when you get down to that core information, what's really at the heart of all of this is, who do I know in common with this person, and is that somebody that I can reach out to and gain additional insight, and ultimately maybe gain a referral or an introduction from. If you're connecting what I call with an A&E strategy, anybody and everybody, then those second-degree connections become far less meaningful and ultimately maybe meaning less to you. Okay. And so what you really have then is this big database. You've got this big list. It's not a reflection of your real-life relationships and how they extend out beyond you and the people that you know. It's more just this collection of people that you've sort of gathered together, and that may work for you, but for most, it becomes a distraction.
Okay, here's one about going beyond connections, Kip. What about the follow features of individuals or companies, and how to use groups?
Yeah, really good questions. And following is, well, that's the only way that you can keep up with a company, because you can't connect with a company. The benefit there is if you do business with either the company as a company or people within that company individually, it's a great way for you to see what that company is up to, because they're probably posting. They're not only posting content, they may be posting jobs. There may be things that you can do for people that you're connected to in the company, perhaps a referral to fill a position that they're looking for, which fall into this how do you add personal value category that I sometimes will talk about. When you follow a person, you're able to see everything they're putting out on their feed. So they're posting content, they're liking other people's postings. You won't, however, see who's in their network. And it's an easy way to begin to keep tabs on somebody without having to ask them if they want to connect. So it's a good first step for somebody that you may not know well to understand what they're up to. Okay.
And then I always thought one of the coolest features of LinkedIn was the ability to create and be part of groups. What do you think about that?
Groups are great. Here's the issue with groups. There are more than 2 million of them, and probably 98% of them are a waste of time. Okay. And so your challenge is figuring out, is the group I'm looking at worth joining and investing in? And the easiest way to get a sense of that is first to go to the group homepage, where you'll see, you'll get an idea of how active the discussions are, how frequent, how many are going at any given time, what the membership total looks like. you know, the larger groups, I think the largest group on LinkedIn, which no surprise is an HR driven one, has more than 1 million members. And you know, you can go down on the other end of the spectrum to groups that have no members other than the person who started them. Yeah. So you know, it's and everything in between.
Yeah,
so you know, figure out. And one of the smartest things that we've seen folks do, and what we encourage people to do, is look at the groups that your connections are in. And if these are people that you know, look for opportunities over time, either through LinkedIn or on the phone or in person, to ask them, are they actively involved? Do they find value in it? What do they find valuable? So that you don't just, you know, tie more weight around your neck in terms of what you've got to monitor here.
Yeah, right. Well, in my experience, too, people are often misusing groups. They're trying to sell things, and they should rather be offering educational material that group can use, and just sales will still come if you be patient with it, I think.
Yeah, you know, there's a great book, and you probably know about it, that was written within the last couple of years by a guy up at Wharton, Adam Grant, called Give and Take. It's not about social media in particular, but it does touch on social media heavily, and his sort of premise is, or his original question was, who does better, givers or takers? And he identifies givers, takers, and matchers, and he goes through a series of stories throughout the book talking about people doing different things. And what it really comes down to, when you think about networking, you know, old school networking, forget about online networking, the people who do it best are always the ones who are trying to solve problems, you know, trying to put people together. You really ought to get to know so-and-so because you guys would like one another, or you're looking for somebody to deliver this kind of product or service to you. Let me put you in touch with some people we've worked with. You know, you're a broker of relationships and of solutions, really. And the people who do that really well, they don't worry about what they get out of it because, like you indicated earlier, they know that something good's going to come of it. And so they just focus on what can I do to solve this problem, and let the rest kind of take care of itself.
Kip, what's your read on the value of other feeds coming into LinkedIn, like Twitter, Facebook, you know, other stuff coming in?
Well, tell me a little bit more about what you mean, Peter, because there used to be a direct linkage between Twitter and LinkedIn, where which, you know, they still have to some degree, but they cut that tie, you know, so that it wasn't as easy for you to maintain. But tell me what you're asking about.
It was a question. We can maybe, if Don's listening, he can recast it for you. But I know you can still post things on Twitter that's
you can.
Okay. Well, then while we're figuring that out, how about the idea of this concept of thought leadership, where you mentioned earlier about sharing and how often and so on, but what are good rules of the road for managing your LinkedIn, where you're actually posting, creating your own stuff? What have you seen people do a great job of, rather than just liking and sharing other things? What have you seen? Have you seen ties to like their blogs on their websites, things like that?
Yeah, yes, and ties to video. People who use the post function within LinkedIn essentially as their blog, and some who do very well at that.
Okay.
You know, the challenge with this is you have sort of citizen journalists now. We all have the ability, and even within LinkedIn, they started with this influencer group of 300 people that they identified around the world that they felt had messages worth sharing. And, you know, they were everybody from Bill Gates and Barack Obama down to people who were industry experts and within fairly narrow niches. And then about a year after they introduced that function, they opened it up to everybody. So there's no limit or filter on what you can do, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be very careful about what you put out. Because I see people put stuff out all the time that, it might be a sentence or two, and it's really, it's almost a non sequitur kind of related to their business. It doesn't tie to it. What I encourage people to do is think in terms of building even a rough editorial calendar. So back to doing things with intent. Who's your audience? Who are you trying to get in front of? What are you trying to say? And what are they interested in? Which is really the primary question, is what in all of this noise is going to be something that's going to get through because it's going to answer a question or address an issue that people that I care about and want to do business with have on their mind. And so it takes, a little bit of forethought. And I would suggest thinking about an editorial calendar approach where you're saying, okay, over the course of the next quarter or year or anything in between, here are the things that I want to talk about. Here's what people come to expect. We've just come through tax time. Can be a huge issue for people in businesses. What's relevant? Not throwing the same old stuff out, but what might be a new twist in the 401k business? They've just come out with this DOL fiduciary rule clarification that has got a lot of people wondering what it means. So maybe it's an explanation of that in layman's terms.
Okay.
That kind of thing. And it takes work. I want to say.
Oh yeah.
Don't get in thinking I'm just gonna, I'm gonna find a Far Side cartoon and I'm gonna post that. That works once or maybe a couple of times over a year. But quotes and cartoons and motivational images, ultimately you're in the social spam category pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you follow the advice that every brand is a media company, and you believe that every brand is not just an entity but a person, then every brand, every person needs to have a publishing calendar and be in the media business and do it the right way, to your point.
Yeah.
Don is clarifying his question, so let me just read it verbatim. The value of remote conversations coming into the LinkedIn platform, does it get too noisy or being disruptive? So it's other kinds of feeds, like LinkedIn, Twitter and Facebook coming in. So I've seen it myself.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it has the potential to, certainly. And it really comes down to what your tolerance is as a user, as a recipient of that, and then what your audience's interest is if you're a producer of that content. Because that's really, it's the ultimate producer-consumer comparison. And I think, I honestly think, and there are people who are on the other side of this issue, but I think we are fast approaching a new phase of use of all of this technology, and in particular social technology, but I'm talking about information digestion generally.
Right.
That is going to be, it's going to center on the ability to filter and to narrow. As a user, to control what you see and to put a traffic cop out in front of whatever your social feeds are and anything else, and say 98% of the stuff I never want to see. And here's the thing that people don't realize. LinkedIn and Facebook, they're already doing this. They've already got algorithms built into the back end of their system. When you put a post out, it's not guaranteed that post is going to get to everybody that you're directly connected to.
No kidding.
Taking it through a formula to say these are the people that we want to send it to.
Right.
So
well, your point about and to your point about noise, one of the points of this article I read last week in the Wall Street Journal is Joanna Stern, the author, was talking about the value of the LinkedIn app. She hates the website. Too cluttered. Always nagging you about this or that. And she says use the app because you can do a lot of the most important things with LinkedIn, such as profile editing, messaging, contact management, personalized feed of job advice and industry news, and more. Just use the app. Do you agree with that too, Kip?
I do. And one of the other things, and perhaps she mentioned this, I can't remember, one of the things that the app does, which you can also do on the site, but the app does very well, is it will push current, what I'll call current event information to you about people in your network.
Yeah.
So who's having a birthday today? Who's having a work anniversary this month? Who may have changed a job? Who's been mentioned in the news? And you know, when we go back, Peter, and we're talking about this idea that your online network becomes a reflection of your offline relationships, that's gold to you. You know, particularly for those for whom money in motion is an important concept, which is on virtually all sides of financial services and insurance. When you have a person or a company that's in transition, and job transition is one of the biggest triggers, that's a time when you're probably on their radar screen, you as somebody who can deliver expertise to them. And so the app and the people you may know section of the site will give you that information, as will it's called the weekly network update, which you can have sent to your email. And you know, just a note of caution on that: if you're going to congratulate somebody on a job change, please take 2 seconds, click through, not on the say congrats button, but on their name, on the link to their name, and look at their profile and confirm that they actually haven't been just tinkering with that profile and that they did in fact change jobs. Because you feel pretty foolish if you're pushing congratulations along to somebody that's just crossed 19 years or 20 years at the same company.
Guilty as charged. Thanks for that one.
Yeah.
But we just got a couple minutes left. Is there a quick search function on LinkedIn? Because this gentleman is talking about how he gets involved in a lot of time-wasting activity, searching things, going down rabbit holes. Is there a way to find people and companies very quickly on LinkedIn?
There's not a quick search function, which would be a great thing. That advanced search screen is the next best thing, and it's been around since the earliest days of LinkedIn, and it's what first caught my eye, frankly, almost 12 years ago when I became, or more than 12 now, years ago when I became a member. The best answer to that is to understand, to play with that a little bit and begin to understand how do searches get structured. And this, you know, I might lose 80% of our guests today on a comment like this, but if you can understand the pattern of search, and that there's in the URL that shows up on the page that lists your result of whatever you're looking for, there are actually pieces of that you could take out and repurpose, you know, reuse another time. So you, for instance, begin to see what an industry code is, and there are 150 of those on LinkedIn, and you're only interested in 2 or 3 of those 150 industries. If you know what those codes are, you can just add those to the end of any search string, and it will automatically narrow it down to that subset. But that's kind of a guerrilla tactic. There's nothing I can point you to that's going to explain that anywhere, and certainly not a page that has that laid out as a set of checkboxes.
Okay. Well, as we wrap up, Kip, is there anything, can you give us any other advice for best practices with LinkedIn if we're in any kind of marketing and sales roles?
Yeah, I would say, and this is primarily aimed at the sales folks that are listening in today, you should never engage in another conversation or meeting from this point forward without taking 30 seconds or 3 minutes or probably something in between to see what is it about this person that you're about to talk to or visit with by phone that's insight, that's new information to you, starting with their profile and then looking at do we have a path of connection? Because the reality with this tool, Peter, and I believe this to be true, you will never make another cold call if you understand the power under the hood of this site and begin to put it to use. And so my advice is to make it routine, create a habit, and we just scratched the surface today. Another time, I'd love to come back if there's interest, and we could look at what are some of the ways to create that process so that on a daily basis you can spend 3 to 5 minutes understanding who ought to be on my radar screen today, and then acting on that.
Okay. Well, Kip, again, great to talk to you. You're a real pal to the folks out there that need some marketing help and technology help at the same time, and it's a rare breed that you can do both of those. And we have more questions. We couldn't get to everyone, but we'll certainly follow up with you all via email confidentially, and we also may have some other follow-ups again confidentially.
Yeah, and Peter, can I just invite, I don't mean to interrupt, but if there's a burning question we didn't get to, and you want to email me at kip@gregory-group.com, I'm happy to respond. It may take me a bit because I'm just back from 10 days of travel and headed back out, but I will get back to you as quickly as I can with a response.
Okay. Well, good. Again, Kip, thank you, and thanks to our audience for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great, Peter. Really enjoyed it.
You betcha.